My name is Clare Reddington. I'm director of Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studio, which are the creative technology bits of Watershed. And we've been working in collaboration with technology companies and individuals working in this area for a long time. And I just thought it'd be worth sharing a little bit about our motivations as to why, and then I'll talk about the TSB project. So we're not interested in creating technology-obsessed micro-genres. That's really clear to me. But we are interested in the production of new work which addresses the way that digital is changing and influencing our lives. We're interested in supporting the conceptual development of artists and arts organisations by giving them new tools and new ways to work. We're interested in developing new types of personalised experience where the audience member becomes the collaborator and can co-author parts of that experience. We're of course interested in new commercial possibilities and the potential for scalable, repeatable projects. And we're also interested in working with artists and cultural organisations to explore the value of new technologies as they emerge, to help ask questions about them, to bring them into a kind of democratic debate, and to make sure that the tools are kind of usable. Because the thing that we've known from collaborating with people like Jo for ages is that what technology might actually be useful for is not apparent when it's being created in a lab or kind of locked away in a tech campus. It takes real people and often people with left field ideas to kind of unlock their potential. So we've been working on a technology strategy board funded project which has just come to an end. It was a 400 grand project of which 200k came from the TSB. And Watershed was nominally the lead partner, but it was very much driven by Calvium and their ideas. And we worked with historic royal palaces, with Bristol City Council, their new Watershed building, and with Bristol Old Vic. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what each of those three partners produced, why they did it, and then hand over to Jo to explain the underlying technology. So historic royal palaces stated, "Our challenge is to help everyone explore the story of how monarchs and people have changed society in the greatest palaces ever built." And what they wanted to do was put visitors in charge of their experiences, giving them the tools to explore and discover the sites. Again, not interested in pursuing technology for its own sake, but looking at how we can deliver innovative visitor experiences. And for them, the layering of digital experiences onto their sites means that they don't have to mess about with the fabric of a listed building, which is really expensive and difficult to do. It means that they can create multiple different experiences for different audience members. It allows the visitors to play a part in the story and make decisions and affect behaviours as active players rather than passive consumers of a kind of the traditional historic detail and context of one of these sites. And crucially, it allows people to interact with an experience with their own device, because hiring out audio tours is really expensive and cumbersome and takes somebody to actually hand them the equipment, get a deposit and get it back. We have very special relationships with our own personal devices, and being able to deliver something through them makes the experience more special and more accessible. So with historic royal palaces, a game called Escape from the Tower was created. There's some really brilliant footage of it online, and it basically asked you to go through an experience and help the prisoners escape from the tower. There were special characters in it, like a polar bear. I never knew there was a polar bear at the Tower of London, but there was. And the evaluation was extraordinary in terms of how much it boosted the time visitors spent there, and also families were really keen to play this together and to collaborate together, which is kind of unusual when often an audio tour is quite a kind of individual experience where you're just listening and consuming. Jo will give you some stats, I think, on how many of those. So 4,462 downloads of the iPhone app so far. And there's been limited marketing, and I would also say these are all R&D projects. One of the things you can't do with the Technology Strategy Board funding is actually take something to market and sell it. These are about explorations of what you might want to do in the future. We also worked with Bristol Old Vic, and their challenge was, how do they enliven their building when there is no performance on? As a theatre, people come at very specified times, they see a performance, they go home. How can they capture some of the magic all year round? How can they find new ways to tell stories? So we worked with them on a project called Memory of Theatre, which was a project they were doing anyway, asking people to remember things that had happened to them, either in a performance or backstage, staff, visitors, audience. And these were recorded binaurally, which means they were recorded in 3D, and then we situated them in the exact place the memory happened. So as you walked around the theatre, you could trigger something that happened in this place. This is a bit of a nightmare because location stuff is usually triggered by GPS, and to do it indoors, GPS doesn't really work. So we had to experiment with all sorts of different ways to trigger stuff indoors. I'm not sure we solved it. We worked with Ubersense, who make incredibly expensive kits for Airbus so that they can track the bits of their airplane as it goes around the factory. And it worked really well. It was lovely, but it costs about £50,000 a room. So that's not one that cultural organisations will necessarily be taking up. But we also made an experience that could be read using QR codes, the little black and white barcodes that are increasingly coming on adverts on products, so that people could take their own phone again and trigger the experience from where they are. And finally, we worked with Bristol City Council on Watershed. So that's the beautiful new museum at the end of the harbour. And for them, they were interested in how they could bust the collection out of the physical walls of their building. How could they create new experiences which encompass the whole city, which would appeal to entirely different demographics, and again, would look at new ways of creating income in the future. So we paired them up with Slingshot, who created a game, again an iPhone game, aimed at families called Fortunes, where you navigate Bristol, and it's got the most beautiful 16th century version of Google Maps. So things like the bridges don't exist, and if you try to go that way, you end up in the water. To collect bits of the museum's content archives and kind of go through the social status. So you start off a very poor person and you end up the mayor or something by the end of the game. There were massive challenges in working across this project. There were big differences in organisational capacity and culture. There was a lot of cash flow issues working with the Technology Strategy Board, who pay you sometimes 6 months in arrears, which for cultural organisations can be a challenge. And there was a lot of bureaucracy. But we, as a collaboration, it was a joy to work on because everybody was incredibly honest and flexible, which I think is really, really important. And we tried loads of new ways of doing things. So for Bristol World Vic, we ended up doing lots of sprints, which is something that software developers use a lot, where you get everybody in the same room for 2 days and just make the project. And you can iterate and test and go. And that worked really well, and it's something I would really recommend doing. It particularly worked well because these projects in cultural organisations can sometimes be the digital thing, the thing that the marketing organisation do, or something which doesn't quite encompass the whole building and doesn't quite enable or kind of inspire in the same way a physical piece of work might. So doing things like sprints and situating them in your foyer means that all of your organisation and your audience are aware that something is going on and want to get involved. So I'm going to hand over to Jo, who's going to talk about the actual technology. Also, I'm around all day, and we've been working with various technology providers in the Southwest for a long time. So if you are looking for collaborators and people, I can either point them out in the room or give you kind of details as for people you might want to talk to.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Fantastic. Jo.
Thanks, Claire. So as Claire's just gone through, this was the project we're primarily talking about today, and we've gone through all of the pilots so far. The goal of the project is listed there at the end. And as I say, this is kind of apt for today because the goal was about actually making it possible for cultural organisations and people who want to kind of get in and create mobile experiences for people to be able to do it at all, at least without having to hire a programmer or subcontract it. If I just kind of recap a little bit about Calvium and where we came from, all the 5 founders of Calvium came out of Hewlett-Packard Research Laboratories, where we'd worked for many, many years kind of in this space and with that kind of goal in mind. And very early on in our kind of research, we chose to work with artists because we felt that artists were typical of the kind of people who would actually make novel applications of technologies, convert them, stretch their boundaries, use them in ways that might open up new business models, new experiences, new types of content. And so we actually found that by engaging with artists early and running kind of experiments, that we could start to look at these values. And then really the art as kind of scientists and technologists and software engineers is to say, okay, how do you take that concept, what's the value in it, and how do you then kind of turn it into something that you can reproduce, make money from, and sell to the world. So that's why. And I think, you know, typical of those kind of projects as societies is what you want to do is bring together artists, technologists, people with different kind of worldviews, ways of thinking into this type project so that you create this positive creative tension because quite often, you know, constraints in technology will kind of push against an artistic desire, and ditto, technology input can help open up the boundaries for an artist who perhaps never knew these things were possible. So we found that kind of that's a good motivating force. This next slide kind of goes through, this was actually taken from one of the ways that we used to report back to the Technology Strategy Board on how we actually developed this project. So, you know, those of you who are used to this, you know that typical projects are broken down to work packages and you report on each of them and so on. But it also usefully kind of shows the architecture of what got produced. So there is a set of online editing tools. We'll show you a screenshot later on of what they recommend so that anybody using our tools can go to a website, use the tools to create their PIRL. We have a mobile player. We have an app called the Calvium Player, at the moment, which you can download from the App Store, and really users of the tools then, kind of while they're developing things, prototyping, doing anything that they like, can test that out on the Calvium Player just by downloading it. And that actually is quite valuable to people in kind of R&D situations, because as you probably all know, you can only get an app onto the App Store if you put it, submit it to Apple. Apple have to vet it. The App Store is not about prototyping. The App Store is about professional apps with good content. So that's not the vehicle you use for that. The player allows you to kind of get things out early, put them in the hands of users, run trials and so on without having to go through that process. And then also, of course, as part of that, we had to develop a bunch of back-end services to kind of manage the PIRLs, you know, handle your content right and all that sort of stuff. And all of this was carried on. We've talked about the pilot so far. So again, you know, with what we had and our motivation, the way that we architected this, the underlying things, is that we said what we really need to develop is a platform that is open enough, because we know that for creative people, they want to have creative control over their content. They want the ability to create what they want, but that is not so flexible that they have to kind of know deep programming. And so that's the kind of skill that gets applied. And the choice we made, technology, was to kind of model the web. So really what I'd say about our platform now is that if you are able to make slick websites now, you could use our toolkit to create cool apps. So the kind of knowledge that you have in developing a website can be applied to our tools. So obviously a website's all about the content. You have to create the media and so on. And you use a JavaScript-like scripting language to use it. And this is what we've done. So we wrapped up kind of the underlying mobile bits, put a kind of JavaScript interface over the top so that that kind of is the level at which you can customize. But we did try to make easy things easy. So this is just a screenshot of kind of the editor. So the idea is that you can, this is showing the screen layout editor. So you've got a kind of what you see, what you get screen layout mechanism where you can create things that will appear on the iPhone. You go to the files menu to upload your media, you add images onto them and so on. So really, I think with the tools, if you have a simple but content-rich screen-based interface, you could just use the screen editor and develop an iPhone app. What we also, of course, you know, have in the tools is the ability to plug in a lot more things. So there's a geo tab which allows you to easily attach regions to locations in the physical world and say, when I go to that region, I want this screen to pop up, I want this audio to play or something like that. And again, for very simple interactions, that's really a matter of filling in kind of properties on the screen editor. And for everything else, there is functions. And this is where I said, this is why the toolkit is both flexible. So if you do know JavaScript, or you're happy to kind of say, well, okay, I've got the grips of it now, I can handle copy and pasting things and working how things work, you can go in and create more or less what you like. So for more sophisticated applications, the power is there. But like anything, we give people enough rope to hang themselves. So that the tools, it's easy to use the tools, design is hard. So we can do nothing to help you, if you're not a designer, become a good designer. And that's why at the moment we say our tools are really aimed at people who are good at design, know about creating experiences, know about how to create content, but just need to get it out there and do it. So if you have that discipline, then that's the kind of platform target. So just to kind of say where we got to, as Claire said, the project's finished now. The quote at the end came from the TSB reviewer. He was really delighted from his point of view of the fact that we did what we said we were going to do, which surprised us because we thought that should be part of the course. But apparently we did it very well. So that was very, very good. The platform is out there. So the current stage of it is we're running a beta program whereby what we want to do is kind of check what problems there might be for people, what are the high value things, what you need to do. We'll go to commercial project in October. And the first kind of customers who are using it are using it for things like, in terms of kind of outcomes and business models, they're digital media agencies who might have made a couple of little apps before and they know how to make an app, they've hired a developer to do it. If none of you know, I mean, it's very hard to get a professional app made for less than about £6,000. There's a myth in a lot of people's minds that app development is cheap. It's actually not the case. If you're lucky, you find a guy in his bedroom who can do it for you kind of, on a nod, then you can get them done quickly. But if you're into serious professional app development, it's not a cheap thing. And so what these customers are recognizing is, okay, we know how to do this sort of stuff now. I don't want to pay 6K or 4K a pop for every single app. I want this tool to come in and be able to replicate that and kind of move and put these images in myself. And that's what our kind of early customers are looking to use the tools to do. So it's going to hopefully, make a significant opportunity in their businesses. They're now able to move themselves into app development and design rather than relying on that being something that's outsourced. And I think that's interesting. I mean, that's, I think, out of time, so I'll finish there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jo. Okay, I'm going to run straight on because there's plenty of time for questions in the main group. Thank you, Jo. As Peter and Tim, or Peter, it's Peter first, makes his way over. Jo, would you mind joining them up there? Is that that would be great. That sounded very interesting, the platform, very interesting. Do people pay you for that at the moment, or is it too early to be paying you?
At the beta, in October, they will free toolkits.
Okay, in October, no, so you've got weeks to do this. Okay, you've got to wire up. Okay, I'll keep planning. Can I ask a sort of first question then of you guys? So, it all went very well. I actually was one of the assessors on that project when it came in. I probably shouldn't say that publicly, should I? But I was a TSB assessor on that project. What surprised you? What did you learn you didn't expect to learn during the course of it? On PIRL.
I mean, I think it's something we probably should have already known, but a collaboration like this, you always have to kind of relearn, I think, that the collaboration itself takes a massive time investment. Yeah. And that it's not just about thinking about what you're doing, but it's about keep coming back to 18 months is a long time, and all of our businesses change massively during that research process. And so having to be able to deliver exactly what we said we'd do, but maintain flexibility was something that I would build more time in for in the future.